What's up, Dfine Nation, and welcome to another episode of Define Your Health with Danielle Girdano, strength through knowledge. And guys, if you heard the last episode, you know that I am just biting at the gift to get back into GMOs with our very special guest, Diana Reeves, who's the founder and executive director of GMO Free USA. Go check them out, guys, gmofreeusa.org. And then, of course, also their Facebook page, facebook.com/GMO Free USA. Get the knowledge you need. Diana, I'm ready to dive right back in. Are you ready to roll?
I'm ready.
All right. So when we had left, the last thing that we were really talking about on the last episode was in the grocery store. And we were talking about how prevalent GMOs were, and really how, even though if you do eat animal sources of food, the GMOs are still prevalent in those as well too. It's not just raw ingredients for processed foods, although processed food seems to be where it's most prevalent that you're going to find GMOs. And so you had also mentioned about the Project Non GMO, which is the little logo with the butterfly on it, which of course, we always look for when we're in the grocery store, right, Dfine Nation? Yes, of course we do. And my question to you is GMO Free USA, one of the biggest boycotts that you guys are really spearheading right now is against kashi. And before I really understood why you guys were doing this, I have to admit, I raised my eyebrow a little bit. And I think some people might also kind of be questioning. And I want to really dig into that because kashi, the brand, at least a lot of their products, maybe not the entire product line, has been verified by Project Non GMO. And so why in the world boycott kashi? Can you let us in on that? What's going on there?
Well, there are several reasons, actually. We are spearheading a boycott of all Kellogg's brands and products because... So
Kellogg's owns kashi then? Is that
yes,
the first
Kellogg's
point
owns
you need
kashi.
to understand? Okay.
And kashi is considered a trader brand, but we've done testing on several Kellogg's products, and we've found that the corn they're using in the products that are not verified by the Non-GMO Project, and they're feeding this stuff to children. For me, I have a very strong protective instinct for children. That's why I chose Kellogg's for our target boycott. They're feeding children corn that produces insecticides. And they're feeding children Roundup residue. And glyphosate in March was studied by the World Health Organization and declared to be a probable human carcinogen because it causes cancer in laboratory animals. So for me, that's a big part of why Kellogg's was chosen. But kashi is a trader brand, and we actually recently tested a kashi product which was in the process of going through Non-GMO Project verification, but the box we tested was not verified. It has subsequently been verified. And in that box of kashi cereal, we found very high levels of glyphosate and AMPA, which is a breakdown product.
Okay, so Diane, so let me back you up here because what you're saying is truly astonishing here. You're saying that a kashi product that you guys had independently tested that was already verified by Project?
No, was not verified.
Was not verified yet. Okay,
it was in the process of being verified.
Okay.
But the box that we pulled off the shelf was not verified. So that it was in the Non-GMO Project, but there were still boxes in the supply chain which contained, high levels of GMOs and very high levels of glyphosate residue.
And let's clarify something here. When you talk about glyphosate, can you please explain, because I don't think the normal person walking on the street maybe has ever even heard of that. What exactly is that, and why is this such a big deal that residue was found?
So glyphosate is the so-called active ingredient in Roundup, the herbicide which these crops have been engineered to resist.
Roundup being the poisonous chemical Roundup that you're referring to, correct? What you spray on your weeds to kill them.
Yes, exactly, the herbicide Roundup.
Okay.
And glyphosate actually has 3 patents on it, which most people aren't aware of. The first time it was patented was by Stouffer Chemical, and it was patented as a chelator because what it does is it binds to and it removes minerals. So there's a lot of concern that it's doing its little binding action in our bodies and removing vital nutrients from our bodies. So that's the first patent. The second patent was patented as an herbicide by Monsanto. And the third one, believe it or not, it was patented in 2010, I believe, as an antibiotic, antimicrobial, which is beyond frightening. So we have this in our food, and what it does is it kills our beneficial gut bacteria. So there was a study done on chickens which found that at a level of 0.075 parts per million, glyphosate actively killed beneficial gut bacteria in chickens. Now, of course, there have been no studies done. There are no human health trials, but this study directly applies to us. And it's no wonder there are so many people with digestive problems, because 70% of your immune system is in your digestive tract. And we now know that the good bacteria that we carry around in our digestive system is a critical part of our health and our immune system. So what we found in Fruit Loops, we found a level higher than that. Glyphosate at a level of 0.12 part per million in Fruit Loops. And we found a level about 6 times higher than that in the Kashi cereal that we tested.
Oh, my God. And you know, sometimes when you talk about these increments, they seem so small, but really they have huge impacts on the human body. I mean, just huge, massive impacts on the human body. All right, Diana, we are going to pick it up right after this commercial break. We're going to keep diving into this issue that I think is just understated in so many ways, and that people truly do not have the education that they need. And so, Dfine Nation, stay tight with us here. Remember that this segment brought to you by the Highway for Health Project. Childhood obesity is absolutely preventable. Find out more at highwayforhealth.org. That's highwayforhealth.org. This is Danielle from the Define Your Health with Danielle Girdano radio show. Something that's truly near and dear to my heart is the epidemic of childhood obesity in the United States. This is a preventable disease. This is a preventable epidemic that is taking over the lives of the next generation of children in this country. This year, Dfine is embarking on the highwayforhealth.org project. What is it? It is a project to call attention to the epidemic of childhood obesity in the United States and how preventable it truly is. The project will give parents the tools and the resources that they need to make the right choices and truly equip themselves with the right knowledge so that they can help the next generations of Americans. Visit highwayforhealth.org. Again, that's highway, F-O-R, health.org. Again, that's highwayforhealth.org.
Water.com offers specific services to help you get the best water you can take. From nutritional information to in-home testing of your tap water. The water you drink should be at its best. When it's at its best, you're at your best. So check in with ewater.com. ewater.com for water purification and other essentials. Give them a call and find out what you're missing. 1-800-964-4303 or visit them at ewater.com. Again, that's 1-800-964-4303 or at ewater.com.
And we are back to Dfine Nation with our special guest, Diana Reeves, who is the founder and executive director of GMO Free USA. If you haven't been to their Facebook page, get there, Dfine Nation. It's facebook.com/GMO Free USA. And so, Diana, now I let's really dig into a little bit of politics and a little bit of legislative actions and why boycotts are so important and really what those boycotts are doing or what they have the potential and the power to do. And I want to keep with the example that we've been using about Kashi and Kellogg's, because I think those are both names that many people know and recognize. And I also, quite frankly, I have to say, it really feels like a lot of deception here. I mean, it seems like the veil has been pulled down and there's a lot of deception going on that people walking into the grocery store simply don't know. So can you elaborate more on why a boycott like this is so important and, what exactly, can the average person do? I mean, really, is voting with your dollar, only buying one product, really going to make that big of a difference?
So we encourage everyone to avoid all genetically engineered foods, but many people find that overwhelming. And for that reason, we tried to make it easier because it does involve lifestyle changes and a lot of conscious, thought process at the grocery store. So what we've done is we've said that we can change the food system if we can force one huge food company to remove GMOs and get non-GMO verified.
Kind of like Kellogg's. If you get one to follow, the rest will follow. Is that kind of your idea?
Exactly, and we chose Kellogg's because they primarily market to children. But what Kellogg's does is they use the profits from the sale of their Kashi products to fight labeling because they don't want you to know what's in there. And Kellogg's was number 3 on the corporate list of amount of money spent on lobbying. They were behind Coke and Pepsi. Actually, Pepsi was first, Coke was second. They spent $3.6 million on lobbying our legislators to stop mandatory GMO labeling in 2013-14. Now, that's a huge chunk of money, and they were joined by many, many other corporations. And if you look at the total amount spent on lobbying, it's absolutely horrifying. Almost $87 million was spent on anti-labeling lobbying during those 2 years.
And the first thing that I say is if you ain't got nothing to hide, why are you trying so hard to hide it? I mean, if things really are safe,
you bet. And they masquerade.
This shadows and all these blankets and coverage of knowledge. It seems very, to me, it seems very logical. If they're trying so hard to cover it up and they don't want you to know what's in there, there's a reason for it.
You bet. And if you think about it, they're crying, we need GMOs to feed the hungry world. Well, guess what? How many hungry mouths could have been fed with $87 million?
Well, and when you actually look at the yields, and that's not something, because I want you to finish this thought here, but when you actually look at the yields that a GMO versus non-GMO crop does over a 5-year period, they don't yield more. But let's finish the thought that we're on, because I'm getting all fired up here, Diana.
Okay, so just to talk a little bit about the legislation. So what's going on in Congress, most people are unaware, is absolutely horrifying. There is a bill which all of this corporate money is behind. It was written by the Grocery Manufacturers Association, of which all of these big food companies are members. And the bill, was authored by Representative Mike Pompeo, and it's HR, so everyone knows, 1599, and it's called the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act. Well, that is not anything farther from the truth. Because actually what this bill would do, the bill would prohibit any mandatory labeling at the state or federal level. It would put in place a voluntary labeling standard, which we already have and we know it doesn't work, but it would make things even more horrific because it would allow foods such as canola oil and cornstarch and cottonseed oil and milled corn to be labeled non-GMO even if they're derived from genetically engineered crops. Wow. And, I mean, that is just absolutely wrong because I know from personal experience I had chronic fatigue for over a year and my diet was clean. I couldn't figure out why I was sick. It turned out I was taking vitamins that contained genetically engineered cornstarch, and when I switched them out for equivalents that were non-GMO, within 3 weeks I returned to health. So I know that there are people sensitive like myself that react to ingredients that are derived from genetically engineered crops. And, you know, that we really need to have the mandatory labeling in place. The other thing that's critical, there are two other things that this bill would do which people really need to be aware of. This bill would prohibit any regulation of genetically engineered crops at the state or local level. It would make it only, you know, a federal issue. And there are counties in California and in Oregon and I think Washington that have actually passed, by citizens' vote, county-wide bans on genetically engineered crops. Those would all be overturned. These are farmers that are trying to protect themselves from pollen drift and contamination and protect their livelihoods because they grow either organic seed or organic crops and they're susceptible to contamination from pollen drift. So that would all be overturned. There'd be no more bans. And then
And if you can hold that thought, Diana, we have got to go to a commercial break. I apologize, but as soon as we come back, I'd like you to finish that third thought and continue the conversation here. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, Dfine Nation, remember this segment brought to you by LaTip International, where members are like family and dollars always end up in your pocket. Serious business, serious bottom line profits. Visit them today at letip.com. That's LETIP.com. Those who know serious bottom line profits know LaTip International. With a proven history of helping small businesses be successful through smart growth and lead generation, LaTip is forging new frontiers of innovative ways to support, educate, and cultivate the development of their members' bottom line profits. If your business needs to grow, and whose doesn't, check out letip.com. That's LETIP.com.
Hi, Steve McFarland with the Make Ready Group here. We focus on getting your place made ready for sale, ready for rent. We are very engaged with the real estate community, most specifically those realtors. If you're talking to a realtor about getting your place sold, then please think about contacting us too, because we can get it fixed up and ready for sale. Or when it's under contract and you have a list of inspection items that those buyers want fixed. Or sometimes you just want to make that place your own. We can handle all of that for you. Contact us if you need us at the Make Ready Group, 214-664-6962.
And we are back, Dfine Nation, raising the bar of knowledge with our good friend Diana Reeves from the GMO-free USA, wonderful, fabulous organization that I just cannot say enough about. Now, Diana, we are talking about legislative bills that are currently on track because a lot of companies don't want you to know what's in their food, and we can debate the ethicalness of that. But you were saying that the first 2 points were basically going to kind of take control out of the state's hands. What was that third point that you were going to go on to?
So the third thing that is buried in this Pompeo bill, the safe and what we like to call the Unsafe and Inaccurate Food Labeling Act, is it would make the USDA responsible for setting the standard to define non-GMO. And basically what they've done is they've mirrored what's in the Pompeo bill to set this standard, which they're not talking about, but what we understand is they said that it is in line with the Pompeo bill, so it would allow things such as the oils and the starches and the milled corn to be labeled non-GMO, and it would, believe it or not, take out any other private labels which have a different standard. So it would basically and most likely abolish the non-GMO project.
Oh my goodness. Now, how far along is this bill? I mean, how concerned should folks like myself and a lot of people in Dfine Nation that actively eliminate GMOs from their diet, how concerned should we be about this? What actions can be taken? What can happen at this point? Where are we?
We should be very concerned about this. It's not something to be taken lightly. Everyone should be contacting their representatives and their senators and telling them not to support this legislation, but to support instead. There's a DeFazio bill in the House and a Boxer bill in the Senate, Barbara Boxer, and those bills are for true mandatory labeling. So we should be contacting our representatives and our senators and telling them, do not support H.R. 1599. Instead, support the DeFazio and Boxer bills. Because if this passes, we are in bad shape.
Well, now, Diana, this brings me to a point that I want to make sure that we address, and that's really the health effects of GMO. Now, we've kind of touched on carcinogens. We've touched on there's no real actual long-term studies that have been done in the United States. We really don't know a lot of the side effects. We're starting to see a lot of those negative side effects and negative chronic health conditions, especially, as you pointed out, with bacteria, good bacteria in the gut, something as simple as that. But you actually have a personal story about the health effects of GMO, particularly dealing with Roundup made by Monsanto, the same company that is essentially trying to have a lock on seed production and trying to push the organic farmer out. Would you mind going into that personal story?
Actually, I would I would be happy to do that. This is the first time I'm actually talking about this publicly, so it's a bit of a difficult story, and I know you understand. But we lost our firstborn child to cancer, as I had mentioned in the previous interview, and he was diagnosed at the age of 2 with a tumor, which was smack in the middle of his brain. It was a thalamic tumor, and it was a fibrosarcoma, which is cancer of the connective tissue. And there's barely any connective tissue in the brain, so the doctors were puzzled, and they looked for a primary site elsewhere, but there was none. And they told us that he was most likely born with it. And so you ask yourself, how and why is a child born with cancer? And then you take a look at events that, were surrounding his conception and your pregnancy, and you learn something that's very relevant, and it makes you say, oh my God. So I was actually at a mini conference, and I met a scientist who was very close to the Seralini study, which was done in France a couple of years ago. And that study was a toxicity study. It was not designed to meet the criteria for a cancer study. So when they released the results, they were allowed to say tumors, but because the sample sizes weren't large enough and other criteria weren't met, they couldn't go into what types of cancer were found in the study. There was a group of rats in that study that was fed no GMOs, but they had only environmentally relevant levels of glyphosate Roundup in their drinking water. And I asked, what types of cancer did they find in that group of rats? And I was told there was only one type of cancer, and it was a fibrosarcoma. And during the week after I had the positive result on the pregnancy test, I was in my yard, and I was spraying weeds with Roundup, which is what people did in those days. Yeah, this was in 1983 when the labels were a little different. They said non-toxic, and they said biodegradable, and we've since learned that that really isn't the truth. And so anyway, as I was spraying the weeds in that week after my positive pregnancy test came back, the nozzle exploded, and the glyphosate Roundup went all over my hands. And I remember standing there and saying, if anything happens to this child, I'm going to know why. And I never had a reason to really revisit that thought until I met this scientist at the conference. And he said, don't beat yourself up. He said there are other factors. There are, multi-chemical cocktail-type reactions to things, and there could have been other things involved. But I have a mutation, which is the MTHFR mutation. I just got the results back. And the mutation inhibits the body's ability to detox. And, in my mind, there must have been a direct connection. And in my mind, the embryo is at a very critical stage of development and a very vulnerable time to be exposed to this type of toxic chemical. So I would just ask everyone, what do you think? The jury is still out, but more information is coming because there is a study being done. I'm not sure that it's underway yet, but it will be soon in Europe. It's a $25 million study which will cover not only GMOs, but it will also cover glyphosate as well as the full formula Roundup herbicide, because it has been determined that the so-called inert ingredients magnify the toxicity of glyphosate, and the full formula is more toxic just than glyphosate alone.
And Diana, I am just, first of all, thank you for sharing that story. We need to cut away to a commercial break very quickly, and then we will come right back in. And Dfine Nation, please remember that this segment is brought to you by the Highway for Health Project. Childhood obesity is absolutely preventable. Check out highwayforhealth.org. That's highway, F-O-R, health.org. Hi, this is Danielle from Define Your Health with Danielle Girdano Strength Through Knowledge radio show. Something that is near and dear to my heart is the absolute epidemic of childhood obesity in the United States. When I was a kid, my dad used to say, if you're not willing to change something or do something about it, you don't have the right to complain. Well, guess what? I'm doing something about it. The Highway for Health Project is a project to call attention to this epidemic, this preventable epidemic of childhood obesity, to give parents the tools and the resources needed to educate and make the best choices possible for the next generations of Americans. Help me. Help me help the future. Visit highwayforhealth.org today. Again, that's highwayforhealth.org today. highwayforhealth.org. And we're back to Dfine Nation with our special guest, Diana Reeves from GMO Free USA. That's GMOFreeUSA.org. Go check them out. And Diana, you just shared a very personal and painful story about how the company who makes GMOs and the chemicals that are involved in the process of raising those type of crops directly affected your child that unfortunately did perish and is no longer with us, and how passionately you feel about a study that is being conducted now. And I'd really like to talk about that for a minute here and really let people know not only more about the study, but where they can get more information.
So Factor GMO, you can go to factorgmo.com. It's a $25 million international GMO and pesticide safety study, which will be launching soon. It's the world's largest ever study. It'll be a 2 to 3 year study, and so it will take into account multi-generational effects. These crops and, Roundup as well have been linked to fertility problems, and this study will shed a lot of light because it does meet the criteria for a cancer study. It'll be a huge study. The results will be published along the way. They're not going to wait until they get to the end. There will be benchmarks that'll be published along the way, and it's going to be an eye-opener because I think this study will be a definitive word on a lot of the problems that the industry tries to dispute.
Well, and I think maybe that's one of the things that's needed is some hardcore black and white, and that's really take a look at this. So, Diana, if you had one takeaway that you would want people to have, what would you really want people to take away from the show that we're doing today?
I think there are a couple of things. I think the first thing is to speak with your wallet as best you can and avoid as many GMO foods as possible. The second thing would be, to start a garden. And the third thing would be, there are many of us that have chronic health problems, and I encourage everyone to do a very, very strict and careful elimination diet. And I think that you will find that many of your chronic health problems resolve themselves when you eliminate genetically engineered foods and glyphosate from your diet. And one thing people don't know is that glyphosate is also sprayed on crops such as non-genetically engineered crops, such as wheat, such as sugarcane, such as flax seeds, such as lentils and peas and beans and even cantaloupe. So I would also encourage everyone to do as much organic as you can to avoid exposure.
Time to break out the overalls and do a little good old-fashioned gardening is what it sounds like to me.
Absolutely.
Well, Diana, it has been an absolute pleasure. And you guys are also doing a tour with Neil Young. Could you take about 30 seconds to just tell folks about that and really how they could best find you guys to connect with you?
We're so excited that Neil Young reached out to us and invited us to join him on his tour to promote his new studio album, which is called The Monsanto Years. And Neil is working to educate concert goers across the nation during the tour, and we will be manning a booth at each venue, which we will be handing out information and educating concert goers about the health risks and the environmental risks and the dangers of genetically engineered crops and the chemicals that go with them. And, we hope that once people learn about genetically engineered crops, they never forget, so we hope that this will really help to move the market further.
As I say many times before, it is not just about existing, it's about living, and there is a difference between existing and living, and I truly am passionate about this issue, and I encourage all of you to check out GMOFreeUSA.org, to check out their Facebook page, facebook.com/GMOFreeUSA. Follow them. And I'm proud to be associated with GMO Free USA. And Diana, let me thank you also for GMO Free USA being a proud sponsor of the Highway for Health project, because I do believe that we need to save our kids, and I believe that you guys are a big part of that. So thank you again for being a guest, and I hope that you can come on again and we can continue this conversation.
Thank you for having me on, Danielle. It was a pleasure and an honor.
All right, Dfine Nation, remember, motivated, dedicated, and highly recommended.